Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be recapping basically the happenings of July 1st as it relates to the San Jose Sharks. So, of course, July 1st is the day every year where the free agency opens up. All of the unrestricted free agents do get signed. Some restricted free agents might get signed. Some might hold out a bit longer. And so some of the Sharks lineup has come into place. Some of their UFAs have left their team. So as we can see, there are still 4 open spots on the team. The addition of Timo Meier, whose contract I went over in a different video, 4 years, $6 million, ends up with Logan Couture there, then an open spot, and really 2 open spots, you could say, in the top 6 as Kane and Hertl round out the rest of it. Then on the third line, it's Sorensen with another 2 open spots before having a basically complete fourth line of Carlson, Goodrow, and Redill. So 4 forwards missing. The Sharks, of course, have some prospects who could come up, but it seems as though they're going to still have to work and sign a couple of guys to fill these open areas. On the defense, however, it is basically all but confirmed what's going to happen here. Shemek and Burns, Vlasic, Carlson, and then Dylan and Tim Heed, who was re-signed. He was an unrestricted free agent. The Sharks gave him a 1-year deal at $960,000 to bring him back. He'll go with Brendan Dillon. 3 offensively minded right-handed defensemen, 3 defensively minded left-handed defensemen, so a perfect mixture, I guess you could say, the Sharks have on defense. And then, of course, Jones and Dell in goal. So as I said, Meier and Heed were both signed. Still to sign, however, there is Kevin Labanc. The Sharks with $7.9 million in terms of cap space. Labanc probably going to take about 3 to 3.5 of that. That would leave the Sharks with just about $4.5 million or so to fill the last 3 spots. It shouldn't be too difficult to be able to pull that off, especially considering while I don't actually have these 2 players and still to sign, it seems mostly likely that Thornton and Marleau will return to San Jose, probably in a combined maybe 3, maybe pushing $4 million. At that point, you could either get an ELC or maybe a cheap forward to play. But with Joe Pavelski leaving, which I will get to a bit later, the Sharks sort of have an open spot in that top 6, because they can obviously pass Labanc as a top 6 forward if they actually need to. But Marleau is not good enough to play in the top 6 anymore. Thornton is a centerman, first of all, and also isn't good enough to play in the top 6. And so it seems as though the Sharks might have to dig into their prospect pool looking for somebody, or maybe promote someone like Sorensen or hope Marleau can be good enough, or else they really do have an open spot there. No Donskoy to try and fill it, no Nyquist, no nothing like that. So we'll see how the Sharks manage their top 6 if they can still keep that solid offensive depth that they had last year. Also, I didn't include players like Suomela or Gambrellin still to sign, because while they are RFAs, the Sharks do still need to sign them. It's unlikely they're going to get any more than like league minimum type of contracts. Neither of them will even touch $1 million, so I didn't feel the need to really mention them. Now for the 4 unrestricted free agents who did sign with different teams in this offseason. First up, Joakim Ryan, who went to the Kings, which is going to be a bit awkward. 1 year, $725,000, so obviously an extremely small deal, prove-it type of contract for Ryan. Knowing the Sharks' luck, maybe Ryan will actually play very well in Los Angeles, or maybe he'll be like a 7th defenseman buried in the system, won't get re-signed by the Kings. Who knows what will happen, but this isn't really a tragedy that the Sharks were unable to keep Joakim Ryan. If they really wanted to, they could have when they didn't tender his qualifying offer. Next is Jonas Donskoy, who signed with the Colorado Avalanche for 4 years and almost $4 million. This was a big surprise. Maybe Joe Sakic liked what he saw when he saw the Sharks play against the Avalanche in the playoffs in the second round. I didn't think Donskoy would be able to get close to $4 million here, and I certainly didn't think he would get anywhere near this term. 4 years is a pretty long time to go for Donskoy, who has shown only really in these past 3 years to be a very inconsistent forward. And so if they are to put Donskoy with maybe McKinnon and Rantanen, he'll probably do rather well. But the Colorado Avalanche still have that issue where past that first line, they don't have much depth, and Donskoy is not the type of player who's able to carry his own line. And so if they end up putting him on the second or third line, you may end up paying close to $4 million for 4 years for, like a 30-point player who can get like 10 goals in a season, which likely isn't great value. So I do like Donskoy, but I feel like the Avalanche maybe went a bit too far here in free agency, giving him that much term. Next is Nyquist, as he gets signed with the Columbus Blue Jackets, 4 years, $5.5 million. Only 4 years. I was a bit surprised by that. I thought he'd get at the very least 5, maybe even 6, but 5.5 is pretty fair for Nyquist. The Sharks just not really enough room to keep him with Labanc unless they manage to make a trade to get rid of Carlson or Dell or something like that. And so going to the Blue Jackets, who had some issues in this free agency, obviously losing Duchesne, losing Panarin, losing Bobrovsky, basically their 3 best players, with Atkinson and Seth Jones still there. So the Blue Jackets, who were quite good this past season, swept the Lightning in the first round, will likely fall very hard, but at least they managed to get Nyquist, so they maybe won't be the worst team in the league, it was looking like that might happen. And Nyquist going to Blue Jackets, I was a bit surprised to see him land there, but not terrible for him, I guess you could say. Still making $22 million over those 4 years. Finally, obviously, the biggest signing would be Joe Pavelski as he heads to Dallas on a 3-year, $7 million contract. A bit less than what I was maybe expecting. I thought he might get closer to 7.5, but still $7 million, a lot for Pavelski. I still have a feeling if the cap didn't cap out at $81.5 million and actually was the 83 that was projected, I think the Sharks likely would have been able to keep Pavelski. But because of the cap being $1.5 million lower than they probably thought it would be, and that number only being set a few days after the draft, a few days before free agency opened, it just wasn't really a feasible thing to be able to keep Pavelski without just moving a ton of pieces here to open up the cap space while still being able to keep Meyer, while still being able to keep Labanc. So it's going to be very sad to see Joe Pavelski in a jersey that isn't teal. We have never seen that in his career. He's been with the Sharks for over a dozen years. He actually won't even be able to wear the number 8 in Dallas because that number is retired. I assume we'll probably go for number 16, as that is what he wore internationally when number 8 was taken there as well, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe Jason Dickinson on Dallas, I believe he's still there, wears number 16. I'm sure he'll move out of the way to let Pavelski get that number. And so it's just going to be a bit strange. I believe the Sharks play Dallas for the first time in January, so that's going to be odd. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of cool, tribute video that's going to play at least when they play in San Jose. I don't know if that January meeting is in San Jose, but just in general, sort of a strange scenario here that Pavelski ends up leaving. It's sort of like that Patrick Marleau one, but I wasn't even as torn up about the Marleau one because I felt like the contract given to Marleau was insane and he was already sort of on the decline, so I wasn't that upset. But Pavelski isn't really on the decline, and this contract is actually extremely fair that the Sharks likely could have afforded if they weren't in this much of a cap problem. So I don't feel like this is a horrible contract for Dallas. This is actually a pretty decent contract for Dallas. If it had the extra 4th year, I'd think maybe it was pretty bad. If this was something like $8 million, I'd say it was probably quite bad, but this is a very fair contract, and it's just disappointing the Sharks could not really afford to give it to him themselves. But there are holes to still fill here. The Sharks have Labanc up on the block. They still need to be able to get Thornton and Marleau. If that does end up working out, they still even have a 4th spot. We'll see if someone from the system or if the Sharks decide to go for maybe a more minor free agent to fill that role. But the Sharks team is really starting to take form here, and it's disappointing that it will be without Captain America. Class dismissed.